and welcome to the Big 12 Mafia Show. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown, and with me I've got a vaunted lineup of guests who have decided to share their evening with me for a little bit of time. And I want to make sure everybody knows how important I think these three guys are to me. So first, I want to introduce Sergeant Pickles, who's been one of the guys that has been one of my early supporters for all of our shows. Pickles, introduce yourself to everybody.
How's it going, everyone? I'm Sergeant Pickles, Washington fan my whole life. It's been an interesting couple of weeks, so I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. Thank you very much for taking the time. And then Immaculate, who's one of our constant contributors and really part of the Big 12 Mafia family. Immaculate, what do you got for us off the lead?
Well, hey, I'm Immaculate. You guys may have heard of me or may know me, but I realize that I am to the right on your screen from someone you probably much more likely to hear from, so I'm going to just leave it at that. And say
All
hello
right.
to the Godfather.
You'll get all kinds of time to talk, I promise. And then here's a special guest that just came in at the last moment. We were able to pull him off a plane before he was heading for his next destination. That is Greg, the Godfather Flugar. How we doing today, Greg?
Doing good. I'm excited for the show. A lot of things are happening, and it happened just before we came on live. Arizona Board of Regents scheduled a meeting tomorrow night, Thursday night. So it's all going down. It's all going down, just like what we believe is going to happen is actually going to happen. The Pac-12 is about to collapse, and Arizona State, Utah is about to make their move.
If you're watching this show and you're new to the program, please subscribe, leave a comment or suggestion. I try to read all those and respond. Also, think about becoming either not only a subscriber, but a joiner for the show. You'll become a preferred commenter, and I try to get as many of those comments out during the show as possible. Also, if you want to participate, super chats are always allowed and accepted. With a show with Greg Flugar, Immaculate, and Sergeant Pickles on it, if you want your comment to be read, it's probably going to have to be a super chat. We're going to run into the hundreds, and so I just want to make sure everybody knows up front, if you want to be noticed and have your comment or suggestion put out there, it'll have to be a super chat. Last thing I want to do is call out my the rest of my Your College Sports Connection family. We have a great social network we're building, and we hope that you're following all the other channels that we contribute to. We just came off of Coos Corners show, and Immaculate and I were able to have some fun time with Justin, and I hope you guys will tune in to him and also tune in to Pickles and obviously Greg Flugar at the end of the day. All right, so let's just jump right in. This is news to even me, this Arizona meeting. Greg, why don't you catch us up on what that means today?
Arizona Board of Regents, it just came out. I put it out on Twitter about 5 minutes. Let me just read you the exact phrase here. Master calendar of meeting events, special board meeting tomorrow, 6:00 p.m., 7:30 p.m., and it's virtual. And that's all. They don't have the agenda listed, I don't believe. But it's all, it's going down. I mean, Arizona, they're we're not going to pull any punches. Arizona is on their way out, and Arizona State's going to quickly follow, and Utah is going to quickly follow after that. There is no animosity between any of those schools in the Big 12. It's Fox is going to come to the plate, and I think they're going to make all those schools whole, along with ESPN. And I know there's a Big Ten meeting tonight. There is a Big Ten meeting tonight, an expansion meeting tonight. So, yeah, it's dominoes are falling all over the place. Sergeant Pickles, Washington. I'm very interested to hear what he has to say about what he thinks is going to happen, how he feels about it. The Pac-12, a great conference for decade after decade after decade. The history, the pageantry. It's a sad time. It is a very sad time, but it's going to be a very new time for the Washington Huskies.
And let's jump right into that, Pickles. So you've taken body blow after body blow this last, we'll just call it the last 3 months. The world changed, didn't it? Where we thought we were going to be 3 months ago, even though there were hints and suggestions, certainly we've come down the road a long ways. And then you throw in what's happened with the ACC. How are you feeling today? That's the reason we scheduled this show, is to sort of let's get some of that energy out so you're not poisoned with the negativity that we've all been carrying around for a long time.
Yeah, Immaculate, and to a lesser extent, you two have seen my slow descent into madness over the past few weeks as this has gone on and on. But I think any old school Pac fan, who remembers even back into the Pac-10, I'm a little too young for the Pac-8 days, but into the Pac-10 days, I mean, it's like, if this all comes to fruition, it's like, a celebration and a funeral all at once. And
Yeah.
It's just kind of crazy. It's like, most people, when these kind of things happen, it's like, oh, where did it all go wrong? And that's the worst part, is for us, we know exactly where it went wrong. Larry Scott, took a shotgun and blew a hole in the bottom of the boat, and Klyovkov was handed a bad situation, but he sure as heck didn't bail any water. So that is where we are now. And, I'll always, have fond memories of the Pac, and I hope we can continue some of those rivalries even out of our future conferences. But it's definitely almost like a changing of the guard moment, because there was arguably a time in, the 90s and 2000s, the Pac was spoken about with the SEC as one of the best colleges in football. It truly was. And for it all to go wrong so quickly is, pretty shocking.
Yeah.
So, Immaculate, you and I have been part of the conversation in the background. We're not telling people how to think, but we are presenting facts and letting people make up their own minds. You've analyzed this from afar, especially being an Iowa fan. You're disconnected from 99% of it. How do you feel this really shakes out by the end of August?
Well, I always would say you guys are going to see eventually, but here it turns out I'm seeing eventually. I didn't see this coming at all. I think that we might have all of our answers by August 15th. I think that they need to get this done quickly. I'm surprised they're trying to handle it this year instead of after the football season. But if they're going to do it now, they have to do it in the next days. So, right. Through this week, I think we're going to see some answers on the Pac situation. And I think, based upon the timeline that FSU could do, I don't think early next week is out of the question in terms of actually maybe seeing some more of the board coming back together, because Greg's seen a lot of this. Some of the things they're saying is we're going to get back to you sooner rather than later, most likely. And every single time I saw the trustee say that, he had a big old smile on his face. So that really paid to be there and see that and get a feel for it. It was something else.
Go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
Well, I was since my live show today, and now coming on you guys' show, I've been told that the Big Ten, for Florida State, for example, that the Big Ten, while doing maybe some vetting and everything, will not bring on Florida State into their conference if that's what they would choose to do at the end, until Florida State has been freed of all their legal entanglements with the ACC. Mm-hmm. So, having said that, Florida State might send that withdrawal notice to the ACC commissioner and the ACC presidents and say, we're out of here. But do they have a landing spot when they do that? For sure. I don't think so. So to me, that makes it even more of a risky play than it already is. Again, maybe my information is incorrect, but I was told in pretty strong terms that the Big Ten, they'll do the vetting and everything, but they're not going to be accepting any invitations when a school has legal entanglement in and around their conference's grant of rights.
So, and let me just really quick reset the stage. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, turn on your notifications. If you're a recent joiner, you know that notifications is where all of us creators drive the interest. And we need you all to turn on your notifications because you'll miss these shows that will pop up out of nowhere like Greg frequently does. The other thing is I want to make sure everybody's tuning in to these guys on social media. YouTube's important, but social media is big, and that's where a lot of the news comes out. And if you want to be in the front of that, like Big 12 Mafia family is, that's part of it. And I want to make sure everybody's doing that. Okay, so this is for everybody. If everything happens the way that we think, and by the end of this month, I can't even believe it's August already. By the end of this month, are we really looking at an A3 situation where it's going to be 3 conferences and everybody else, or is it going to be A4, an A2 plus 2? What do you guys think?
Who'd you like to go first?
I don't care. Your talk first. Take it.
Okay. I think it's most likely. I look at this FSU thing as much kind of like we did with Colorado. Before Colorado moved, most people were like, okay, that's crazy talk. Colorado happens. Now people are in the game with it. A few other things happen. Florida State comes out with this. I think other schools now, if we get some other schools that also want to take action, this could be a much bigger collapse within the ACC than we even saw with the Pac. We did have some talk come out from ESPN that their SEC is looking at 4 schools. So I think the play has worked, and SEC has been called out. ESPN is with them. So we're going to have to see where this goes, but we could have updates on that every single day.
Where did you see the SEC looking at 4 schools?
Well, I was watching ESPN right after.
Okay.
And it was all over College Football Live. They were talking all about it.
Did they mention the 4 schools at all, or?
That did not happen at that point in time.
Okay.
Someone else was in chat and said that there was on the, who was it? I think Thamel or someone came out and said that. So you'd have to look on his postings to see if it's there for sure. But that's what I saw. Someone was saying that Thamel was saying that.
And I think ESPN reported a little bit ago. I might have it wrong, and I apologize if I do, but I think ESPN mentioned for the Big Ten was Florida State, North Carolina, Virginia. I think Pete Thamel put that out about an hour ago.
Oh, okay.
A couple hours ago. So,
yeah, it would be interesting if they're just like, we don't need Florida State, we don't need Clemson, we have those states, we don't care. We'll take maybe Miami, North Carolina. You're talking
State. About the SEC now, Mac.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we're talking about the right conference.
Okay. Yeah, I think the SEC has stepped forward and they're in the game now. And that's really what I was waiting to see. I was like, they're not just going to sit here and be quiet about this. And of course, it's going to come out on ESPN when they jump in. So,
right. Okay.
And I think Washington, Sergeant Pickles, I think Washington and Oregon, I think it's going to happen quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, the timeline definitely seems like it's accelerated, and there's a lot of moving chess pieces. It's almost like a game of chicken, and we don't obviously see a lot of things behind the scenes. Well, you probably do, Greg. You got all the connections, but for us mere mortals, we just have to kind of see the dominoes as they fall. And it's hard to judge, does Arizona trigger? Everyone said, oh, Colorado, and then all the dominoes would fall, and that might still happen. But it almost just seems like we're right at the edge of multiple big moves happening in very rapid succession. Like Arizona goes, maybe the Four Corners follow, Washington and Oregon to the Big Ten, maybe FSU triggers within, there's a real possibility that could happen within a 2-week span, and that's kind of mind-blowing.
When we're considering the types of changes that we're talking about right here, and our web, I just want to let you know, I'm looking up for that link. If anybody else can chase down this link, he's talking about the agenda.
Yeah.
Did you find that, Greg?
Yeah, Arizona State, Michael Crow, the president, and Robbins are going to be there. It's, asking for illegal advice on athletics matter. We know what it's about, right?
Right.
It's getting the board all on board. It's, I've got it here, but it's the same language as all the other board The board will convene an executive session for the following items pursuant to ARS 38431 for a review of the assignments for Arizona State University President Michael Crow in the University of Arizona President Robert Robbins. So this thing is a all-encompassing Arizona State for possible legal advice and discussion regarding university athletics. So in this, once I believe once this officially happens, like officially, Arizona State, Arizona application, Big 12 accepts, Yormark sends something out, then I think you're going to see Washington and Oregon, Big 10 move very, very quickly.
That would
At the end of
certainly
the day,
make some waves
biggest
for
thing
us.
that we all need to know.
Go ahead, Bomber.
The reason it makes a difference is I was just going to say, the reason this makes a difference is because at the end of the day, everybody has to do these pro forma things. We're not getting rid of the Board of Regents meetings. They're not going away. They have to go through these steps. Otherwise, nothing works. So all we are is basically on for the ride, reporting what these agendas are. But I think it's sort of foregone conclusion that we're going to start using them as more a sort of a rote thing rather than being special. Here's a super chat from Miss Reed, I guess. You're great, and I always try to catch both the Big 12 Mafia and peek around the corner. Thank you very much, Miss Reed. Really appreciate it. And I know Greg, do you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Texas Tech, Red Raider. Appreciate it. I've got a question for Immaculate and Sergeant Pickles, if I can ask.
Please go. You bet.
Yeah. Excuse me. So we're going to do a little pretending here. Immaculate.
Okay.
I
don't pretend anything. I know everything. No.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, we're just going to set the table here. Let's say Oregon and Washington, and I believe this is going to happen, but we're going to pretend that it did. Oregon and Washington are the 17th and 18th members of the Big Ten Conference. And that's it for 2024. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, 2024. I mean, the ACC thing, Big Ten don't want to touch it. I think the positioning of where Stanford and California is I think there's quite a big gap between Washington and Oregon versus Stanford and California, and how much support there is, especially with Fox Sports. Okay, so let's just say it's Washington and Oregon, 17th, 18th member. We just did that 2024 football schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
We just did those matchups, right?
Yeah.
We just decided. I'm saying we, Big Ten,
right?
We just did this thing where we figured out everybody's permanent rival list. Okay, Iowa's got 3, Minnesota's got 2. Now we got to slide Washington and Oregon into this. Okay, we did all this work. It took months. Now we never did. The Big Ten never did put out dates for those games. So it isn't like Immaculate is planning to go to the Iowa, Minnesota Golden Gopher game, NBC primetime game, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have
that.
Good win. Huh?
This should be a good win.
Sorry. Okay, so whenever that game is, I mean, the date isn't set. So, but we still got to rip up this schedule. And do we do an 18-team one conference? Probably. Do we do a permanent rival thing, or do we have UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon have that 14 pod where they each play each other? So that's 3 games. And then the 14 pod of Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin. And then that 16. And then, Northwestern, Illinois, Indiana, Purdue is the other 14 pod when it comes to scheduling. And then the other 6 Big Ten East teams, they're all playing each other. Of course, they only play each other. There's 3 games there. Are we going to that? Are we going to Washington has a 1-team permanent rival, which is Oregon, and Oregon has 1-team permanent rivals, Washington? What are we doing, Immaculate? What are we doing, Sergeant Pickles, about to become a Big Ten football fan. What's happening?
If I could go first, I think we already came up with the answer for this in a previous discussion we've had, Greg, and I would love to see what Sergeant Pickles has to say about that after I say this. We had talked about how the schedule for the Big Ten, how much more able they are to kind of switch it around than what the SEC is doing. And I think if what you're saying is true, if that's how it goes down, we're going to find out about that. And we're going to see Washington and Oregon just kind of slipped right into it, because there's some teams with 3 cross rivals. There are some teams with 1.
Yeah.
So I think that they can just plug and play them into there and make the best of it that they can. I don't think we're going to pods, 3 pods yet.
Pickles.
Well, for starters, I think Ohio State could bring that game with Washington back and just make it a conference game.
Right.
Seeing as they didn't think we were good enough to fly all the way out to Seattle to meet us. So you could start with that one. That'd be pretty fun. But it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think the Big Ten gave themselves a ton of flexibility while still preserving as much rivalry as they could. They didn't force everyone to have, you must have 3 rivals. They said, no, these games are considered traditional rivals. We'll lock them in, and everything else is up for flexibility. I could see a scenario where you say maybe SC and UCLA are natural pair, and same with Oregon, Washington, or you make all 4 of them, 3 constant rivals for one another just for scheduling. I actually think that's the better solution, because you knock out 3 games for each of them, and that means they're only flying across the country 3 times, and presumably you'd have 2 of those as your Iowas, your Nebraskas, your more nearby opponents. And I think I did kind of some rough math on it. I'm not some scheduling genius, but you could limit the majority of Big Ten teams to 1 long distance game in their schedule, at maximum 2, and have it all work.
Yeah, you can do it. Yeah. The way it was set up now, you could limit all the other Big Ten teams for only having 1 trip out to the West. And with 18 teams, it also works. Yeah, people have done the math on that. So
let me get caught up. Pickles, can I get caught up on a couple things, and then you can pick it up again?
Go for it.
So we have a new subscriber in the house. That would be Randy Bluth. Thanks for being here, Randy. Appreciate you becoming a subscriber. If you're going to be coming back to these shows over and over, you want to be called out and recognized, you can subscribe for as cheap as $3 all the way up to $10. There's different tiers. Go to the YouTube page, hit the join button in the middle of the screen, and pick your level that you want to join at. And each one has different benefits. I will say to those that have already subscribed, I am working on getting a logo and merchandise out. We're a little behind peek around the corner. Greg has set a wonderful precedent. We're trying to copy that a little bit, but that's coming. So if you've already subscribed, that's going to be on your way. If you haven't subscribed yet, there's options there, and you'll see that coming in the door. So thank you, Randy. Appreciate it. Now we have Opie super chat. He says, my nightcap of cloak and dagger and spear eye vision, I guess. Let's see. 2 TGF, The Godfather, 1 Coos, and Big 12 Mafia and the Holy Rivals. And the Ed McMahon of the Sidekicks, immaculate. Just had to do that again. Great shows. And I want to call that out too. We've got a good group that we're really organizing. And I think if you're here and you're listening to this show, I recommend you listen to those other shows too, because there's a lot of good content coming out, and we'll keep you entertained forever and ever. All right. Go ahead, Pickles. You can pick up where I left off.
Well, I was just saying, outside of even the scheduling thing, and I've kind of had to weirdly been able to kind of relax just slightly, like maybe this will really happen, and think about, okay, how would Washington and Oregon stack up out of the gate? And anyone saying, we'd be right up there with Ohio State and Michigan, that's wishful thinking at best. But I also don't think we're going to go the way of Colorado and stink it up out of the gate. It might take us a while to adjust, and, there's potential for a Big Ten recruiting boost, but I would challenge some people saying we would turn into Nebraska. Look at what Washington and Oregon have done with the Pac-12 media deal in a West Coast that is perceived as inferior for a decade. We've still been relevant, both made a college football playoff and New Year's Six games. So, I don't know if we'll be right up there with the best of the big boys right away, but I don't think we'll go, hide in the basement for 5 years before we get it together either.
Have we reached a point, guys, where recency bias dominates historical relevance?
How so?
Like, let's talk about Washington. I'm from Washington State. I
Mhm.
totally appreciate the value and the amazing contribution the University of Washington has provided to college football as a whole.
Yeah.
Are we paying for their historical relevancy or the recency bias, which says they've maybe been down a little bit, even though we've had some participation in the New York Six and playoff games? Where are we going to be in 10 years? Which is more important? And is that why a team like a school like Oregon, which is really lacking in a lot of other areas, is highly relevant when it comes to brand?
Well, just to touch upon that lightly, and then Greg can take over on that one. I see Washington actually the big as good as their programs are in football. I don't see that as even their main reason for being grabbed by the Big Ten. Their capabilities, their potential is always there to do well. So the rest comes down to just making the right choices of your coaches, your recruiting, all of that. But they have all that they need in order to be successful. So because of their other institutional strengths, they're an absolute grab. In terms of doing well in the future, the only thing to maybe wonder about is you're going to have a smaller schedule out west. So, but you're going to be playing the top schools there. So I think your recruiting will be just as good or better out west. But how are your teams going to handle a little more travel to their
lots of travel, a lot more than they're used to.
That's going to be interesting when they start to think about that in terms of their recruiting. You need guys that aren't going to crack at that. So looking at people mentally, like, can this person take it versus this one? So that'll be interesting on the West Coast schools, I think, is to learn how to play coast to coast. And the Big Ten schools are going to have to do the same thing, just not to the same degree because there's only 4 new schools coming in on the West. So
could I jump in just a sec?
Yeah, go, please.
So, for example, guys that have watched Ohio State, you will know the names JT Tuimoloau and Emeka Egbuka, outstanding players. They are both from the greater Seattle area, and those are recruits that I believe maybe you don't land both of them, but you have a hell of a better shot keeping them home, saying you're going to play in the same conference as Ohio State instead of being where the pack was when they were recruited.
100%. And I look at Arizona in the same way. I see a lot of 4- and 5-star Arizona kids that are starting to come up, especially from like the Chandler, Gilbert area, and they leave and they go east. They're not going to California schools. They're going to SEC schools. They're going to looking at Big Ten schools. So I think this is actually probably better for getting those type of folks and keeping them in town instead of having them go off east.
What do you think, Greg?
A couple of things. One is, Washington, University of Washington is a Big Ten school. Incredible large research university. Seattle, Washington. The national advertisers are going to love Seattle, Washington. That's why once the word got out that USC called the Big Ten, the donors and the people who own all these national companies, they wanted USC into the Big Ten. So Washington, historic, recent, whatever, Big Ten wants them. And they've wanted them for quite a while. And Oregon we talk about it, is a brand multiplier. That's not going away. Even when Phil Knight passes away, that's just not going away. Fox wants them. Fox wants them in the Big Ten. In regards to what Sergeant Pickles said about how Washington's going to do when they enter into the Big Ten conference, I'm going to give you a little word of warning. Nebraska, okay, you're not going to be like Nebraska. Well, I tell you, when you enter into the Big Ten, and let's say you played the Minnesota Golden Gophers 10 times.
Yeah.
You might beat us 8 times. Okay? Is that fair?
That's more generous than I thought you were going to be. I was going to go with 5 or 6. Yeah.
All right. Whatever number that is. However, in the Big Ten, a lot of times your schedule is you got to play Minnesota, you got to play Iowa, and you got to play Wisconsin. I mean, it's one big team after another in places that we make sure the turf is a little slow. Okay.
Yeah, I get it.
So Nebraska, and now when you watch, like I watched 93.7, Steve Sipple out of Nebraska. These guys, they've had a lot of shows on this subject. It's like we thought we knew what we were getting into when we joined the Big Ten. We didn't. People warned us that we didn't need to have a backup defensive tackle at 300 pounds, just like our starter, things like that. And we have never been able to get through our heads that we are in the Big Ten. And hopefully Matt Rule knows, because he's from, Penn State guy originally. They know now. Nebraska knows that they're in the Big Ten, and hopefully they out-recruit Minnesota every single year. But Minnesota has laid waste to them. Right. Nebraska's at the bottom of the Big Ten because they're so small when they play us. They get pushed around. So Washington, USC. I know USC is going to be great. They're going to score 1,000 points. I saw Tulane score 45 on them and beat them in the Cotton Bowl. USC's got to change it up a bit when they come into the Big Ten, because that week after week after week playing in this environment, and especially in October, it gets cold in Minnesota the last week of October. In November, forget about it. It gets real cold up here. So you got to be a little different. You got to change it up a bit.
I would pose to you, Greg, I believe it's our 3 most recent games against Big Ten teams. One of them, so a few years ago, granted, played Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl, lost. Absolutely fair. We lost. Penn State's a better team. Wasn't a blowout, 35-28. Rose Bowl, Ohio State, the very next year, excellent Ohio State team. We lost. Granted, I'm not claiming we're as good as Ohio State.
Yeah.
Final score 28-23, not a blowout. Very winnable game. Ask Michigan State what it's like to come play in Seattle. They got their butt handed to them last year.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just saying, a 500 team is not out of the question.
Gophers defeated Spartans at Michigan State last year 34-7. That team was terrific. All I'm saying is, in isolation, Washington's going to be able to beat a lot of teams in the Big Ten. I'm just saying that Big Ten schedule is different than isolation, so you got to really stack up. You got to get bigger on the lines. That's all I'm saying.
It's really comes down to the perception is that the West Coast schools, and I would even put mid like the mountain states, Utah, BYU, whatever. They're very tough schools, but they're more finesse, right? Utah a little less so, but all these schools are looked at, honestly, a little perception bias that they're going to run into these bigger conferences, and I would even say the Big 12 is getting tougher. And in the Midwest, these games, they're very hard. They're difficult to win. And running undefeated anymore is getting more and more difficult. So if anybody has the idea that they're just going to walk from one conference to another and dominate, like some of this crap I've read on Twitter, that these teams from the Pac-12 that are going to walk right in and dominate the Big 12, it is absolute lunacy.
You guys are already throwing the elbows. Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. And
I may have been one of those people.
I love to see it, but it's nonsense.
I got Washington going to the playoffs this year.
Yeah, so there you go. But they're playing against the Pac-12 schedule.
And Dunze. I mean,
let me call out one more member.
Oh yeah,
Immaculate. You can have it. I'll give you a second.
No. You're good.
I just want to call out David Hackett for being a member of the channel. He subscribed. Thank you, David. Thanks for joining. I'd like to encourage, if you want to be recognized on the show and your comments read more often than regular comments that aren't subscriber based, please consider being a subscriber. Hit the join button on the main Big 12 Mafia page, or you can do super chats like we've had tonight from Opie and Miss Reed and our web, and we try to get to those as well. Okay, go ahead, Immaculate. I know you're chomping at the bit.
No, you're good. I was just going to try to add another angle to this from a Big Ten perspective. Is coming over here, like Greg said, for those games, it is going to be a different experience to get used to. But the same goes in the other direction, is that overall the Big Ten as it is right now needs to get ready for different perspectives and different styles of football coming in. And I think that's going to start to turn this conference into something that's not just about winning the Big Ten, but it's about winning beyond that. And that's really been the conference's big problem, is playing. Ohio State does, but that's just because they're loaded with talent.
Yeah.
But I think the rest, and we're seeing that with Luke Fickell in Wisconsin. I think we'll see that with Rule in Nebraska. Hoping someday we'll see that with Iowa.
I like it. Think positive. It's good.
Being, yep. Hey, got to get 25 points. Either way, it's a win-win, right? Anyways.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think that's what's going to happen, though. So to Sergeant Pickles in Washington, it's not just about you coming in and like playing towards us, but the same way, bring that other style of ball, and it kind of helps the Big Ten become a better conference as well.
Yeah, we haven't always been a high-flying offensive league. I mean, had some pretty solid defenses and running games over the years. We're not, no disrespect to the Big 12. You're just known as a quarterback, chuck it down down the field type league. And Washington can do that, but it can do a little bit of the tough stuff. Kind of going back to the recruiting thing, I think that's where maybe they've been a little bit lacking, is some of that beef up front. All the best defensive line recruits like JT Tuimoloau end up at Ohio State. And maybe that's where Washington could really see the difference.
That might be the case, but you guys got the quarterbacks right now. You are the offensive league. You guys have got receivers for those quarterbacks. You guys,
yep.
That's my opinion right now. That may not always been the case, but right now you guys are seen as the.
He was at Indiana, Michael Penix. So I mean, you guys had him, and I understand he was hurt, but still.
These games, though, where you're bigger in the room without playing on the field, which is nonsense. Look at what happened in Michigan last year. They crowed about how good their offensive and defensive lines were, and TCU just ran around them. They didn't have to be the biggest or strongest. They were the fastest, and they won the game. So any given Sunday, in this case, any given Saturday, there's no one team outside of 5, maybe 6, that you could say no matter what, they're going to be in the Final Four every year, and it just doesn't happen very often. Blake Phillips in the house. He gives us a super chat. Ask a question to Greg. Greg, how viable is the Big 12 after this realignment?
Big 12 is in the room. They've secured their place. They're in the room. They're in the room for the 2026 college football playoffs. They're in the room whenever the NCAA basketball tournament gets reformed again. They are in the room, and that's so. Yes, they're viable. They've made it. They've made it as so far as the next decade or so. I mean,
right.
Who knows what's going to happen? But they are in the room. They're viable. They're not going anywhere. They might get a few ACC schools years down the road. They did it. They succeeded. Bowlesby did a brilliant job getting the 4 schools that he got, and then Yormark has just ran circles around Kliavkoff. October 30th, 2022 will go down as probably the most impactful day in Big 12 history, when Yormark got the media deal done before the Pac-12 did.
Absolutely a fact. Earl Carr, who I already thought was a subscriber, he's subscribing again. I'm not sure, Earl, what you've done there, but I love you, and I really appreciate all that you do and bring to the community. Let me just call out a few people that are just take a break here. I know, Greg, you need to go, so yes. I know you're going to have to be on the road. Give me 1 second to call out a few people. New members: David Hackett, Randy Bluth, Danny Reich was recently added. Mark 9999, Mike Rayner, Andrew Barchak, Rick Banovich, Sooner Lemon. Let's see here: Kaufman, Sticky Sports, Kadu, Mark Rookert, Blake, Vernon Sheldon, Sergeant Pickles, Bill G, Glenn Lumen, Earl Carr, BR, EJ Brown, Pac-12 Pilgrim, and Les Brown, who happens to be my father and loves me a lot. Okay.
Yeah. Earl upgraded
Greg, what?
Earl upgraded his membership.
Oh, he upgraded. Okay, Earl, I appreciate that, and we got good things that are going to be coming to you. Okay, Greg, I know you said you had to leave.
Yeah.
You got 7 minutes. Tell us what is in our near and distant future. Those 2 things. What happens tomorrow and what happens in a week?
Arizona Board of Regents calls Thursday night meeting. Sources tell Action Network, I find it hard to imagine the state of Arizona Board of Regents would be willing to allow one of its institutions to leave the Pac-12 while the other stays. That doesn't seem logical. So I think we all know where this is heading. Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah are going to the Big 12. Big 12 is going to go to 16 teams. I happen to believe Oregon and Washington is going to get done quicker than people realize. A lot of work has been done previously. Oregon and Washington are not going to, in my opinion, are not going to have any problems coming in at us a discount. Because you know what? 6 years is going to pass. Then they're going to be full members of the Big Ten Conference. They're going to get incredible exposure and resources. And at the very beginning, they're going to be on the Big Ten Network. They're going to be partial owners of the Big Ten Network. Just that equity raises the value of both their athletic departments from day one. And I think that's going to happen quickly. I am not a believer of I'm not a believer of California getting it done, getting an invite. I believe Stanford has an uphill. I can't believe I'm saying this because I said 6 months ago. I said Stanford's going to be a Big Ten school. That's the one school that I'm completely baffled on how they're doing things. So I think the Big Ten is going to be at 18 for 2024. I think the Mountain West is going to grow from 11 full-time members. They got Hawaii as their 12th football team, and I think they're about to go to 16. I think they're going to take on Oregon State, Washington State, and a couple other teams. So that's where I think it's all heading. And the ACC situation, I think some schools might declare that they're out of the ACC, but I think it's going to take some time to see what happens. But that is a huge story. It's not going away anytime soon. That's how
Is it like Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy? I declare bankruptcy. Is that what this is with FSU and Clemson? That's what it reminds me of. When I heard that, it evoked into my brain, hey, this is just like Michael Scott.
Well, as Immaculate has said it better than I could ever say it. After watching what Peter Collins said last night, and I listened to it after I was done with my show, and what the Board of Trustees said during the meeting today in Tallahassee, holy smokes! If this is brinkmanship, if this isn't real, then it's brinkmanship, and they're pushing it all the way to the edge, and they're not going to be able to do this next year if this is what this truly is.
Right.
But I got a feeling this is real. I got a feeling they're going to withdraw. I think it's really risky, and I don't think they have a landing spot when they do it. Immaculate may disagree with me, but what I've been told, they definitely don't have a secure landing spot, and it makes it so much more risky.
Really does.
No.
Sergeant Pickles, hang on a second, Immaculate, you're last.
No,
you're going to come at the end of as Greg's walking.
Sorry, I heard my name and I'm like, what? Okay.
I know he teed you up, but I want to extend that tease a little bit longer. Pickles, you have any questions or comments for Greg before he goes?
I'd say, do you think that Washington and Oregon is somehow tied to Florida State? I've seen a lot of that going around that, they need Miami and Florida State to really make the four make sense. No. Do Washington and Oregon stand on their own?
No, I mean, Washington and Oregon could possibly help a Florida State. Florida State, no, they've been, this has been a long time with a lot of things being said. Washington and Oregon have been at the utmost interest for Big Ten, even before UCLA and USC was announced to go to the Big Ten in June 30th. This was always the plan. It was all about timing. Could the Big Ten get Washington in the near future or 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line? But you were coming in. You were coming in regardless. And we're college football reporters. You can take however I'm going to say this. College football reporters knew this. A lot of people knew this. Pac-12 presidents They knew this. And that also hindered the ability for the Pac-12 to get a media deal. The networks knew this. Washington and Oregon are coming into the Big Ten, and because the Big Ten was never going to go to 20 schools or more with only having 2 schools west of Lincoln, that wasn't going to happen.
So the rumors of SC blocking the move are overstated.
I refuted it every single time it was brought up on my show for 12 months. That's not how it works. USC did not come to the Big Ten and say, oh, by the way, we're only coming into the Big Ten if we can stop Oregon and Washington.
They can't drive that.
That's just not. USC got so much. They had so much leverage, Sergeant Pickles, and they received so much. They are the only Big Ten. UCLA and USC are the only 2 Big Ten universities or 2 schools coming in with full membership of the Big Ten network, full ownership from day one. They're the only 2 schools that have ever gotten that. So they got a lot. They don't get a veto pen either. So
Immaculate. What do you think?
I can live with that.
Well, to kind of go to the fun, crazy end of that, USC and UCLA don't get votes till 2024. So if they got a problem with the Oregon, too bad. They're coming in. You want to go back to the USC? I don't know if you've noticed, but there is, or I mean, go back to the Pac. There's no more Pac to go back to. Yeah, so that could be rough if that's how they did it. But at the same time,
and I'll say one more thing, and I got to go. Sorry, Immaculate. I'm stepping
no. Absolutely, go right ahead.
And I've said this before, and people think I'm crazy, but the Buckeyes, the Wolverines, the Nittany Lions, and these schools, they want more foxes in the hen house over on the West Coast. They don't want USC and UCLA to have this wide open space with all this new Big Ten money, with all this Big Ten exposure, with all this Big Ten branding, having that wide, huge recruiting in the front yard and the backyard and that whole area without any other school that can match them on the stratification revenue line. They didn't want them to have that all to themselves. So Washington, Fox. Oregon, Fox. Now you 4 Foxes can split up that talent, the resources, the money, the sponsorship out there in the West Coast. And maybe it gives the Minnesota Golden Gophers a chance to beat one of you guys late in the winter. I got to go.
All right, Greg, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Everybody follow this man, Greg Flugar, and peek around the corner.
College football, peek around the corner. See ya.
Hi.
Thanks, Greg.
Have a great night, Greg.
All right. I want to call out another new member in the house. Overworked and underpaid. Aren't we all? Nice to be here. Appreciate you signing up as a new member. And big things are coming. The future is now for Big 12 Mafia and the Holy Rivals. We appreciate you guys being here. All right. Greg was a surprise. So now we're going to kind of drill down a little bit into Washington. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, turn on your notifications, give us a good comment, give us a thumbs up. If you want your comment to be read tonight, it'll probably have to be a super chat just because we have such a volume of them. Or you could do what Overworked and Underpaid has done and subscribe, and those get preference over regular comments. Okay. So now this day, in fact, I'm going to say the last 2 weeks for the University of Washington have been absolutely crazy. And Pickles and I have been trading messages for the better part of about 3 months. So Pickles, today, right now, especially after hearing from Greg, do you feel better about what's going to be happening? Or are you still lamenting the loss of this conference that, yes, it has history, but honestly has been run into the ground with recent management?
My whole perspective on, the Pac enduring long-term absolutely went straight out the window with SC and UCLA. The only difference with Colorado is I think it accelerated the timeline. Obviously, I think the Pac could have got a media deal done, and I'll go to battle with this. People can disagree with me. That's totally fine. We know now that the Pac presidents were eyeballing the Big Ten deal as a benchmark for themselves, which is just insane to anyone who follows regular logic.
Yes.
I was defending my conference with the thinking of we just need to match or be in the ballpark of the Big 12. And I thought that was a reasonable goal to have. And I stand by the belief that had that been the president's goal a year ago, they may have actually got it done and we'd be in a good place relative to the Big 12. But they didn't. They, thought they were sitting in a much better place than I think, we really are. And fans know that it's been terrible for a decade, but somehow I think the Pac presidents had a little bit of Larry Scott-itis where, no, don't look behind the curtain. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. We'll make it right with this next deal. And it's like the damage had already been done. Not only that, SC and UCLA are gone. So who are you trying to fool now?
Right. I think I completely agree with you. And you have been, you're very similar to a Wild Ute who's looked at this a little bit longer than just immediacy in front of your nose, a little more pragmatic, and figured out you want to be in a position of strength and not sort of groveling and begging to go anywhere. You're a proud university. There's no reason you should be begging anybody. This comment for you, Immaculate, from David Hackett, who's a subscriber. He says 247 and ESPN reports SEC meeting tomorrow. This would be Thursday to discuss expansion 4 to 6 schools by 2024. Holy smokes! If we take saying from Greg, what do you think about that?
Yep, that's what I was talking about, where someone had mentioned that this was put out there, but I hadn't seen it yet. But if David's also seen it, then I think it's safe to say that this is being put out. And that's exactly where it has to come from, right? It has to come from ESPN. Who was the other one that reported that, by the way? It was ESPN and someone else reported it?
I don't know. I just saw the comment right now. I'm not sure.
The comment, I think, said 247 also.
Oh, yeah, sorry. On this comment. I thought you were talking about somebody else.
Yeah,
this was 247 ESPN.
So that's interesting that they're part of that too. But yeah, this is what I was expecting and I was waiting for and I was dying to see is what is the SEC going to do? Because it changes a lot on this, because there is what Greg is saying, that risk if Florida State's just going to jump out. But if this starts to create a chain reaction, then there has to be some type of internal arrangement within the ACC for this to get saved. Otherwise, that could be a big problem in terms of if they get 8 votes to dissolve it or something like that.
Right.
So I think if SEC is in for 4 to 6, that possibility of getting everyone in the ACC a seat becomes possible. If they'll take 6, doing the math, that's kind of where we were at. I thought maybe a little more than 6, but if they're starting off saying that, that is great news, especially for us if we're looking at FSU and Clemson. Schools trying to get some to the Big 12.
I think 6 is extreme.
Well, that's what they're saying. I actually was thinking that in the end, not all at once, but in the end, it might be upwards of 8. But
not today. Not today.
This no, yeah, that is an extreme first play, and
right.
We'll see how that plays out. Where their strategy is on that, but this is what we're expecting. And if they're coming in, then if you're the Big 12, and we're talking to a lot of Big 12 folks here,
right?
Know that this means that now the Big 12 is probably looking at ACC schools too right now.
Right.
Well, Immaculate, I'm actually going to go the other way. And if we're taking the SEC comment at face value and let's just go down the tinfoil rabbit hole, they're going to take 4 to 6 schools, right? If you're talking about taking 6 schools, that would put probably a couple Big 12 schools back in play for them, like an Oklahoma State. Now, like I said, very down the rabbit hole and unlikely, but you're going to get to a point where, as secure as the Big 12 feels, it's like you're still a target for them. It's just the truth.
I'll say this real quick to that. I've been purposefully not bringing that up because so all I'm going to say is I'm not saying no to what you said.
Yeah. So, well, this is a Big 12 show, but that doesn't mean we put our heads in the ground, tinfoil hat or not. I think there's definitely a possibility there's some schools that could go in a big master play, but that would be you going to 24 schools. And I just don't. Maybe it happens. I don't know.
It'd probably be the next phase.
Yeah, I think it's the next one, not this iteration, but the next one.
I love that I kicked some of the Kansas to Big 10 and West Virginia to SEC Hornets nest in the chat. That's fun.
You definitely changed the trajectory of the chat.
Just so you guys know that none of that bothers me. I know there's going to be movement. If you run into people on Twitter or whatever that are closed-minded and think that their schools definitely wouldn't move wherever it was, I would tune them out because nobody is off the table. Right now, there's probably 4 or 5 schools that can say for sure we're not moving. Everybody else is on the table.
Yeah, this has been my life with Washington and telling everyone else telling me where my team is going and how much we're worth or not worth for 6 months. So I
Right.
thought I'd just share the love a little bit.
Oh, sure. No, go ahead. I mean, that's something you can definitely take on your own. It's not a big deal. David Brownburner says, I have a question. I'm a Longhorn, and why is everyone hyping yours and y'all kicked our ass last year? Penix needs to be respected. Do you know what he's talking? You're talking about the bowl game, right?
Yeah,
That's what this is
Alamo Bowl,
referencing.
Washington versus Texas. And Texas fans, they were talking some mad smack before the game. I tell you, that's not surprising for anyone that knows Texas.
Right.
But it's a lot. Oh, we're gonna destroy you. You're terrible. You didn't even play in your championship game. And I'm like, you didn't play in yours either. What are you talking about? And
Right.
Penix, the game score ended up being decently close in the end, but Penix just lit him up. They didn't have an answer for him, and yeah, I think if Penix stays healthy, this isn't really a dark horse pick. He's hyped all over the national media too. But if he plays as well as he did last year and they're able to get some of those big wins against an Oregon or USC, I expect him to be in New York for the Heisman ceremony. I'm not saying he'll win. I'm not that bold yet. But if he stays healthy, I expect him to be there.
Just a little tease tomorrow. And I can't remember the time, but it's in the evening. I got my next University of Washington show is Rebecca Go Huskies, and that'll be tomorrow. And if you've watched Greg Flugar's show, peek around the corner, Rebecca Go Huskies is a huge University of Washington booster, and I can't wait to talk to her. Just like I've looked forward to this Sergeant Pickles interview, and I hope everybody will tune us in tomorrow. While I've got a second here, everybody, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Give us a comment, a suggestion. Give us a thumbs up in YouTube. Become a subscriber, and your comments are definitely preferred in chat. Or you could do a super chat, and we read every super chat, unless it's really got some bad content. And so far, I've gotten lucky. That hasn't happened once yet. Right when I say that, I'm going to knock on wood because that's going to be coming. Here's a comment from a Go Higekun. Anyway, have to take into account the gauntlet, different than preparing for one team. If you don't, then Oregon would be near the top of the Big if you use their recent record against the Big. So this is where we're talking about strength of schedule and going what it is currently in the Pac-12 versus what it'll be in the Big Ten, and the same thing could be said for any of these schools going into the Big 12. What do you guys think about that and the strength of schedule as we go have people move from conference to conference?
It's definitely going to become a thing, but you also got to remember, according to everybody, that the Big Ten, it's only 2 and everyone else. So really, how bad is it for them? Now, I don't necessarily agree with that assertion, but in general, as we do this consolidation, I do think strength of schedule is going to get tougher, and that's just going to be how it is going. We're going to probably move even to 10-game conference schedules.
Pickles?
Especially in Immaculates, we're going to need a second set of conference championship semifinals. A 10-game schedule makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. I think the argument against the 10-game schedule, if you're just going regular, is, extra trips out west would be inevitable, and maybe some schools don't want that. But, it's for the Huskies, I think travel is going to be what it is. You're making enough that it's fine. No one cares in the reality about the Olympic sports, but I think some concessions are going to have to be made for those kind of things. But as far as football goes, it's kind of a balancing thing between, you want more football. You definitely have a deeper conference. So a 10th game is not out of the question. It's not like it's going to hurt you for playoff selection, but how do you make the travel work?
Well, I'm not sure when we'll go to that. I don't know if it'll be with this move to 20 or if it'll come after that. I have to really kind of dive into that and do the math. Can't just kind of do it at the top. But I do look at eventually us going to 10. So when I'm looking at 25 or 24, that's when I definitely think we're at 10. And when you look at the numbers, if say you have 5 divisions, it comes out pretty well. If you have 5 in your division, that's 4 that happen every year. Then that's 6 that you have against the other divisions, and you just kind of equal that out between them. And I don't think it's too bad. And even in that case, you're looking at 2 against any one other division. So that's like one trip to the West Coast still, even when you're at that many schools with that many divisions and a 10-game schedule. So it's not actually that many, really.
Yeah. I don't think Nebraska would be too happy being stuck in a 5-team division with the rest of us, but that's okay.
Well,
They have to play somebody.
There's more to come in terms of Big Ten growth in that region, I think. So we'll see how that goes.
Here's a comment from Moen. And Moen, I sent you an invite if you want to join the show. If you don't want to join the show, then I'll bring somebody else on. I know you were busy tonight. But he's responding to Tony Lawson, who says NFL scouts said MHJ was the best receiver prospect since Calvin Johnson. Remind me who that is, guys.
They're talking about, I think, the Ohio State receiver that they have this year, the guy who, if he didn't
Marvin
get
Harrison
injured,
Jr.
if he didn't
Marvin
get injured
Harrison
in that,
Jr.
that
Yeah.
game against Georgia, I think Ohio State was going to win.
He got hurt in that game, right?
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
it changed the way they were playing. So
yeah, that's really tough when you get hurt and you have people that are sitting around and wanting to come off the bench basically to play. It's a difficult thing to step into. Let me go to this comment from UCF Realist. He says, so this path to 3 20-team conferences, let's clear that up. We actually think it's an A3. The A is, remind me, Immaculate, what's the A stand for? I'm spacing the second. Autonomy, 3. And we actually think it's going to be 24. That's where we think we're going to be at, is 24 teams. And I think that's probably.
No one says 24.
Well, that's true. Immaculate says 25. I want to.
I'm still on 25,
straight.
but I'm
Right.
reeling a little bit from what's happened. We'll see.
Right. Okay, Moen, I know you've been busy all night, and you had some stuff that you told me earlier that I haven't mentioned. What's your hot off the presses news tonight?
One, Marvin Harrison Jr. did not get hurt. He got illegally targeted.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Pac-12 officials dropped the ball on that one.
You're not going to have me standing up for Pac-12 officials. I think we hate them the most.
Okay, so he's legally targeted. Let's get that straight. Okay,
he's illegally targeted. I'm just going to put it out there.
Okay.
Lots of stuff's been going on. Oregon and Washington are in.
Okay.
There's no doubt about 17 or 18. I disagree with Greg on Clemson and Florida State. I think if Florida State leaves, what Florida State is probably going to do is request applications from the SEC and the Big Ten.
Okay.
And at that point, it's going to be basically is the reward versus the risk. And I think the Big Ten would take the risk. I think Fox would take the risk.
So you're saying right now that you think at least Florida State is definitely going to take that informal Big Ten bid?
Florida State is definitely going to leave the ACC, and I think they're going to submit applications to both conferences.
Okay. All right.
And I think both conferences at that point have to come to them and
Yeah.
I don't see the Big Ten passing on Florida State, regardless of the legal situation. I think it's too important. There's too much future proofing with Florida State to ignore it right now.
It's a fistful of dollars.
Okay.
It's a lot of money, but
they're
it's
playing
not
the
like
two
the Big
powers.
Ten is.
It's like that old movie. They'll be playing the two powers against each other. I mean, once they're free and open and available, and the SEC is saying 4 to 6, they just came out and said 4 to 6 that they're open to it. I mean, you can't tell me they're not thinking about Florida State at that point.
So what about Clemson then?
Clemson's in the same boat.
Yeah.
They just submit an application to both and say, who's taking us?
You got to remember,
And
both of those schools have had SEC schools blocking them, so maybe those schools changed their mind.
Okay. All right.
They would
Then
have to.
anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just put in there that I think once Florida State leaves, Clemson leaves, Miami leaves, UNC leaves, Florida State's going to give a lot of people courage to pull that trigger.
Yep.
But
And once that happens,
sorry.
Notre Dame leaves.
Yeah, that's the next step. I was just going to ask you about Notre Dame. That's really no expansion without Notre Dame has been the watchword for over a year, maybe even longer. You think this is the final nail in the coffin for that?
Yeah. Yeah, they wouldn't have a regular conference to play in. I don't see them accepting a bid to the SEC. I don't see them accepting a bid to the Big 12. It just leaves kind of the Big 10. I mean, they can try and remain independent and try and cobble together a schedule, but what's NBC going to be willing to pay for that?
I just don't get the willing to pay 70 million or even 50 million for 6 or 7 games. That's the part I can't wrap my head around.
Well, hindsight being 2020, we look at that and we thought that was just kind of crazy. But what if that's what they would need because they already knew something like this was going down with the ACC and they were going to lose that money? So if they already know they're losing this money,
right?
And they're looking at that saying we have to have at least this much to stay afloat to where we're going or what we need. And if we can't get this, then we got to probably go to the Big Ten.
Okay. Immaculate or Pickles, you guys have questions for Moen?
My only one was because I'm been trying to keep tabs on the Florida State thing, and I've been trying to, I guess, understand from Greg and others, does them, going through whatever process and whatever methods they think they have to leave, does that break open the dam and, everyone comes flooding out? Or do the other schools have to basically buy their way out also? Because there's two different scenarios to me. One is FSU just opens the door and everyone walks out. The other one is FSU buys their way out and other teams have to do the same. And I don't think there's really that many that can.
Right. Well, I think what first and foremost happens is Florida State leaving gives people courage. It's a lot easier to walk through a door once somebody's opened it for you.
Right.
So
True.
I think Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, all those schools walk through that door after Florida State does it. The other schools, the Virginia Tech, Virginia, more likely to follow suit. North Carolina State, likely to follow suit. Louisville, likely to follow suit. And once Notre Dame leaves, a lot of people believe that Notre Dame leaving the ACC opens up the ACC wide open for everybody to leave through some means. I don't know the exact legal maneuver they have, but they insist that Notre Dame leaving the ACC would give them the best legal argument to leave the ACC.
But you contend that just by default, that isn't necessarily true.
It's
right?
not necessarily true. It's not going to stop Florida State from leaving.
No, I'm just talking about in general. If they're expecting one break means all break, that's not necessarily true.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Here's a comment from Nick M. At West Virginia Mountaineer Lair with Kenny. Big 12 East. Just picture this. West Virginia, Cincy, UCF, Kansas, Iowa State, K-State, Houston, TCU. Big 12 West, Arizona, ASU, CU, BYU, Utah, Texas Tech, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. Just from my standpoint, that is an amazing conference to play some football and basketball. What do you guys think?
That's solid top to bottom. And I'd say, especially if you're leaning into the basketball, some realistic targets. I know all the West Virginia fans are screaming from the hilltops for Pitt, even a Virginia Tech if you can. But if you're leaning into basketball, go get Syracuse. They have a massive fan base, and everyone talks about UConn in New York. Syracuse is actually popular in the state of New York, so that wouldn't be a bad grab either.
I'd probably go a little different than this. It's a great lineup, but I'd probably set up the divisions a little bit differently. I'd probably try to do 4 pods that then go into 2, just because it splits up old timers like Iowa State, K-State, and KU from Oklahoma State and the Texas schools. And that's kind of what caused the problems for the Big 12 previously, is when the Texas schools came in and it pulled Oklahoma and Oklahoma State to the south. It caused a lot of drama in that conference. So I'd be careful at separating that again and making that same mistake again. But when you look at that lineup, I like the lineup.
I would love to see, that's only 16 teams. I could see 4 more easy right away. I could see Pitt, Virginia Tech. I know Moen has an idea about Georgia Tech, and so do you, Immaculate. Georgia
Louisville.
Tech's obviously, yeah, and Louisville. Those are all valuable schools that I could see easily put into a revamped Big 12. Are there any others that we haven't mentioned that you guys think people ought to be aware of?
Definitely the North ones like Louisville and Pitt. I definitely like those. See a couple different options for Pitt maybe in the future, but that's not in this first round. So Syracuse. I like Syracuse for the Big 12.
You guys like Syracuse? Yeah, I think that's kind of a weak pick.
It's part of it because they play football now, but they're also part of his basketball solution later.
Okay. They have a top 25 size fan base in all of the country, which is, you wouldn't think so, but they do. New York is just a really populated state, and they're one of the big schools there.
And Syracuse graduates fill the halls of ESPN. Just saying.
Yeah, I like the Kansas fan in chat does not want Syracuse. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sort of on board with Syracuse either, but you guys, well, I don't know about Pickles, but certainly you guys are more Eastern biased, so.
Yeah, Syracuse is a slam dunk.
I have to mention
the amount of Syracuse alumni that work in New York City that go. I mean, if you go to a bar in New York City when Syracuse is playing, it's nuts. Okay. And I don't mean just any bar you go by that has that game on is filled with Syracuse fans.
People think I'm crazy for it, but I have Syracuse as an alternate for the Big Ten in that last round possibility.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see.
Probably not, because I think they're going east more to the south than they are to the north. But
I'm focusing on 20-team conferences. I'm not even getting that far into it.
Right, 20 is saying,
like, that's the value of Syracuse. It's more than I think some people think.
It's a golden
it makes the short list.
Yeah.
Really quick, if you've just joined the show, or you're new to the show, please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up and leave a comment or suggestion. We try to read those and respond to them. I've had several shows that have been generated from comments, sort of get my brain thinking that we want to talk about. If it's interesting to you, it's going to be interesting to us. The other thing is, if you want your comment to be read tonight, I don't even know, we're way over a count that I could possibly monitor by myself. So it'll have to be a super chat, or again, if you're one of the subscribers that have joined the channel, I'm trying to grab those as well. There's one, and I think everybody will respond to this one. KU to the SEC would put KU and Missouri together. I promise you guys, if you're not familiar with that rivalry, you have no idea how strong it is. It's a borderline toxic. What do you guys think about that one? Because I know Kansas and Missouri hate each other.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to say what I think about that, but I know I've told you. If I say what I think about Kansas and Missouri right now, your entire chat's going to blow up.
Okay, that's what we're here for.
You can go last.
Say it.
Yeah, you can go last, Immaculate.
Okay, I'll go last.
Go for it, Moen.
I was going to say, for a borderline toxic rivalry, as an Ohio State fan, I would have no idea what you're talking about. It's not like the state of Ohio and Michigan literally fought a border war or anything.
Right.
So I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. All right. No comment. Pickles.
This is a West Coast perspective, and this is going to sound very ironic to anyone else because you don't care about any of our rivalries. The only reason I even know about this one is because I have an aunt who lives in Kansas City. Otherwise, I would have no idea this was even a rival. Nobody out here knows about it or cares about it. We know about Kansas State. Great rivalry. We know about the rivalries with the Texas teams. Mizzou left so long ago, and they've been so bad, I forget they're a program sometimes. And I know you're all going to say that about Wazoo sometimes, and that's fine. I'm just saying it is not like a nationally, universally recognized thing.
Okay.
Shh. Okay.
Go, get him.
The SEC now does have an exit fee, thanks to Texas.
Right.
So there's that obligatory shot for everyone in the chat. That's another thing that Texas caused to happen in a negative fashion, is that the SEC thought that they needed to have an exit fee because of Texas. Now that I've said that, I actually think that they would let Missouri leave for free.
You think that was a choice they regretted? They would let them go.
It's just not working. And when you start to look at their location, their actual campus location, and when you start to try to figure out future divisions, which are geographically based.
Right.
It's a stretch. Would they want to bring them all the way down to being a Texas-focused division? Do you want to bring them all the way over to being a Tennessee-focused division? It's tough either way. It's a pain in the butt. And if say you're the Big 10 or the Big 12 was willing to take them, I think then let them go for free. Now, could the Big 12 entice them to come over? They're going to lose money. That's another question. But maybe if the entirety of the SEC looks at them and says, "Don't make us vote on you," then maybe they would. But yeah, I think that's the one kind of trick that people maybe don't see coming, and that's the Missouri really doesn't fit there, and Missouri didn't really want to go there as their first pick. They got denied at their first pick. So if we needed them just as a geographic pick to round out a division there in the Midwest where there's a limited number of choices, otherwise you're going to have to start reaching all the way out west to somehow bring in Colorado or Utah to figure that out. So
yeah, I don't see that.
I have them as it's a small possibility. I wouldn't even go 50-50, but it's something there that I'm looking at. So Missouri might be the kind of the surprise play on that.
Okay. Moen, did you already go?
I would just add that I'm from Ohio and I have heard of the Kansas-Missouri rivalry, and it's an extremely, extremely toxic rivalry. So it stretches all the way up here. We've heard about it. We've heard about people burning stuff, and it goes back. It has legitimate historical.
Okay.
I think it's the only other rivalry other than Ohio State, Michigan that literally has a historical armed conflict that it's based on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's real.
Let's get to this comment from Jeremy Callahan. He says, Utah greatly overestimates their own value. I think that goes for a lot of schools, especially as the Pac-12 breaks up. We're hearing about a lot of schools in that regard. He says they are basically the Pac-12's analog of Kansas State. And when the Big 12 was on the brink of getting picked apart, all you heard was too bad for K-State. What do you guys think about that?
I'll go last.
I think Utah is a great school. I think if you're going to add a school, I don't think Cal and Stanford are getting into the Big Ten. I know Cal is out there right now dropping their pants trying to get into the Big Ten. They're doing everything to try and get into the Big Ten, and it ain't happening. I think if you had to add another team on the West, it would be Arizona State or Utah. So
ASU
I know you don't like to hear that. ASU's one, but Utah.
I just think there's not demographics. There's no way. It just I know what you're saying, and I don't devalue your opinion.
I'm just saying
I'm saying my opinion's right.
6. Yeah, your opinion's right.
Did you hear that? Okay, I wanted to make sure you heard that.
Utah would be at the bottom of the Big Ten pecking order, but it would still be in the 10 pecking order.
All right, Pickles.
So I've been really trying, and let me be clear. So the too bad for K-State comment, I actually said that back a year ago, and I meant it. I genuinely felt bad because I was not one of these Pac fans, wishing for the imminent death. I was totally on board with combining the best of the Pac and the Big 12 to challenge the other two, but we all know that's totally out the window. I knew what it was like to be in a conference and a team in some ways that was overlooked for a decade. So I don't have the hate that some Big 12 fans do. And the fact you all hate Utah so much is exactly why they will end up in the Big 12, because rivalries sell.
Yes.
People will show up. People will watch. They will watch them play in Ames, Iowa, because all the Iowa State people absolutely hate their guts. It will be hilarious, and it will drive ratings.
Yes. All those things are true. Immaculate.
You got to win to villain. And if they come in there and the entirety of the Big 12 is hating them, guess what? That's great for TV. You imagine those boos on TV? That's some WWE stuff right there.
It's true.
Well, but imagine if they win the Pac-12 this year. That'd be their third Pac-12 title in a row.
Yeah.
I would never live it down.
I mean, if you're the Big 12, you want that Utah BYU game and all that comes with it for there is an option to put on TV.
Yeah, we've been saying it for months, obviously, here and on my Holy Rivals show. As far as I'm concerned, Utah coming in is a fantastic pick. And if it doesn't happen, somebody at the Big 12 office is screwed up. So it really needs to get done. Let's see here. There's a couple other I saw. So many comments. I cruised by these. Here's one from Mark9999, who's one of our subscribers. He said, but if FSU leaves, how many votes to dissolve? I bet it's 6. So how does that break down, you guys?
Nobody knows.
I think everyone is assuming that it's going to have to go by the state of North Carolina laws, because it's not explicitly said in the gores, and we've looked at them. They are out there. People say that they're hidden away. Well, we've recently seen them. It's not in there, and so by North Carolina law, I guess it's 50. You need 50% basically. So that's why people are saying 8, because the conference is at 15 schools. So even if Notre Dame has a vote, then that gets you to 15. So you'd need 8. If Notre Dame's not part of that, then it's 7. So when they're saying if FSU leaves and it gets to 6, I'm guessing he's thinking someone else is going with them. So that takes them down to 13 schools. And if Notre Dame doesn't have a vote, then 6. But I would say maybe it's a little bit more than 6.
Right.
Okay.
But dissolution isn't tied to the gore. Dissolution is tied to the conference.
To the conference.
bylaws.
Correct. But once that conference disappears, then party to that contract is gone. So, contract's gone.
Right.
Makes
But
sense.
I don't know what the conference bylaws state. I know what you're saying, that North Carolina law would supersede the conference bylaws, but most conference bylaws require a supermajority of 75% to actually dissolve a conference.
So as we start to wrap down here, we've got 9 minutes. I want to first do a call out for all the subscribers that have been here tonight and all those that have given super chats. You're super appreciated. The future is very bright at the Holy Rivals and also at Big 12 Mafia. We've got advertisers that are going to be coming in. I want to call special attention to Coug Connect, who's BYU NIL. If you are a BYU fan and you're not doing an NIL of some sort, you're not helping the team. We need big money to compete, and we've been begging to be on the same stage as a Washington, even in Iowa and an Ohio State. And if you want to compete, you have to spend money. So scan that thing with your phone, donate $10 a month, and become part of the solution and not just part of the complaints department if they aren't able to get good players. The next thing is I want to make sure everybody knows to follow these guys on Twitter and any other social media that they have. All 3 of them are very important people out in the metaverse, and I really value their association and want them to know I appreciate their time tonight. Let's get this comment here from Pickles. When we were talking with Greg just a little bit ago, he said he was hesitant on the Cal and Stanford part. Moen, you're the most insight on that from firsthand knowledge. Can you educate everybody, if they're new to the channel, why Stanford is such a pill?
Stanford doesn't want to share research dollars. Everybody who joins the Big Ten, we share research dollars. You become a part of the academic alliance. It gives every member institution access to your research library without exception. The only exceptions that could be made are for military contracts, which are very few. And Stanford's just not going to want to do that. They're not going to want to share that with us, simply because they make way more money on research than probably, I'd say, 55 to 60% of the Big Ten combined. Stanford does huge research numbers, especially with pharmaceutical companies. So they're not going to give that up. As far as Cal goes, Cal is one of the biggest hypocrites currently operating in the Pac-12. Some of the things I've heard about Cal would just spin your head. just some of the double speak that they come up with and some of the things they've done. So no, Cal's not going to be in the Big Ten either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Funny thing.
You guys want to say
that
anything else?
Yeah, I'll go real quick, and then I definitely want to see what Husky says on that. But a funny thing that I saw
Sure.
at PAC Media Day is this one of the Stanford football players actually talked about the internship possibilities that he has at Stanford and how exciting that is to him. You don't hear that in most of those type of talks. And that one of the reasons is because Stanford, from reports, damn near has a monopoly on many of the tech giants out west, their internship possibilities and spots coming out of college. And I don't think they want to share that because part of the BTAA is quite literally in the bylaws of it is that you share internship possibilities, and people from other Big Ten schools could then come out there and get some of those internships. So I think that it's a net loss for Stanford, not a net gain. And we're not talking about sports, we're talking about the academic side, right? So and they don't care enough about football and all this stuff to offset that. So whereas a lot of these other schools, and they're looking to get in their front end about bringing in schools or students, sorry, is about the school having, this sports atmosphere and the fun of that. It's a release when you're studying to go and then have a game and the camaraderie of it. Whereas Stanford, they don't seem to care that much about it because people don't go to those anyways. So it's less of a loss for them, I think, if they were to go independent for a while. I do not see them getting the call up.
Pickles.
It definitely struck me that Moen said, Cal, some of their fans are out there shaking everything they can the Big Ten's way, trying to get an invite. Well, they're doing everything they can except for actually winning football games. And you're still in California. Yeah, you're going to lose out recruits to USC, but there are plenty of good players that come out of Northern California, and the majority of them go somewhere else, including University of Washington. So they have no excuses. Their administration doesn't care, and their coach actually does a pretty good job considering what they give them to work with. I think it's funny, Cal leans on their research, and they do. They're outstanding. And these are the same numbers that Wild Ute used, his National Science Foundation research numbers, which counts certain things and not others. Right. Washington actually leads the entire Pac-12 in research. Cal is third.
And we've said that. That has been noted. We've called that out.
Yeah. Washington would actually be number 2 in the future Big Ten, only behind Michigan. Right. So,
true story.
We fit pretty darn well. And Cal, I don't know. Stanford is truly elite in a lot of ways, and I think that they're both rightfully arrogant because they're at such an elite level, but it might be their undoing, like you guys have pointed out, that they're not willing, to share the research they have, which is a mandatory thing in the Big Ten. So I think it might be their undoing, and they could go independent and they'll basically be playing a G5 schedule. Maybe they'll get a Notre Dame game, maybe an SC game as an out of conference, maintain some of those rivals, maybe. But I think, truthfully, I don't think Ivy League should be out of the question for them, because I think that's a group of schools they would actually maybe break that, lockdown on their research for, is somebody they consider a peer.
Yep, makes sense. Kaufman, who had to leave. By the way, thanks for calling this out, Pickles. I saw your comment. I'm like, oh, I missed him before he left. He was one of the first subscribers to the channel. He says, well, I will need to watch the video, the whole video later. He says bye to both Mafia and Holy Rivals people. And Immaculate, Moen Vision, and Pickles, he wanted to say hey. So I want to recognize that. Kaufman's a great, great guy. All right, just a couple more minutes here, guys. I'm going to let you guys all give your little piece. I want you to take this opportunity to share what your current thinking is, and then I'll do our bump to tomorrow, and we'll go from there. So let's start with you, Pickles.
Man, there's a lot I could get into. I understand why. I'm just going to go off on my tangent. I understand why Big 12 fans turn up their noses at Wazoo and Oregon State. I understand why they're probably going to get passed over. But, man, the fans that they do have, I think you find a lot of camaraderie with Big 12 fans. They may be small in number, but they support their school, win or lose. They come out. The majority of Wazoo fans live in Western Washington, and they drive every weekend, 3-4 hours across the state to go watch the Cougars. They're passionate, and it's a shame that they're, likely headed for a lesser place. And that's a bummer. I hope that they somehow permanently schedule the Apple Cup. Maybe the Big Ten can give us a break and let us play that game in November like tradition. But, it's a shame. I just wanted to shout out my Coug and Bee friends out there.
Appreciate it. Immaculate.
Well, I'll go with that a little bit here. Oregon and Washington State. Oregon State, a little worried for them. I think that there's still some chance they could get in the Big 12, but in terms of trying to figure out divisions out in the future, it's kind of hard for me to see that. But I could be wrong on that, and hopefully I am. I think if they do go down with the Mountain West for a little bit, I'm seeing the Mountain West or some of those schools actually merging up with the AAC and with some of the rules in the future. I think that'll be a better spot than it is right now. I'm not saying, it's great or anything, but I think it's a better option than what the Mountain West is going to be. So I think that there is some light at the end of that tunnel. In terms of what we're going to see, though, here coming in the next coming days, though, that's probably what everyone in here is listening to and watching for. I'm saying this week we have the executive session tomorrow. If that goes well, look for an announcement immediately after that to do another executive or an open right at Friday night, which is a good time for them to kind of bury it over the weekend. But I think we're looking at Arizona State on Friday. And then I think we'll see movement from Utah early the next week, and hopefully some ACC, SEC, Big Ten craziness going on with all the media next week.
Very good. Moen.
I agree with that. I think Arizona and Arizona State, you'll find that out by Friday. They're out. They're heading to the Big 12.
Friday meaning 2 days away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll find out.
Sure we got
I'm
our
not saying
weeks
they'll
right.
make. Right. You'll find out. I'm not saying that that's when the actual announcement will be made. That's when the leak will happen that they're moving.
Right.
Much like it happened with Colorado.
Okay.
And then I think probably mid to late next week, you'll see Oregon and Washington welcomed into the Big Ten.
I think
And
right now.
late next week, Florida State late next week, Florida State leaves the ACC. Officially withdraws.
I always think I outweigh your pauses and then you sneak up on me, Moen. I don't know how I do that. I'm always thinking I've got it all dialed in, and then I don't time it a little bit wrong. So anyway, thanks guys. Appreciate you all being here. Appreciate everybody in the comment section, all the new subscribers, and then obviously all the super chats. You guys are awesome. We're building a community that realignment's not gonna kill.
Can I get in one more, Bomber?
Yeah, go ahead, Pickles. Yeah.
All right, we'll go around the room real quick. Guys, 2 Fridays from now, am I drinking scotch or champagne?
I'm a scotch celebrator too, actually bourbon, but I say both, man. Just have a good time with it.
To be clear, scotch is for sadness, champagne is for partying.
You're going to be popping some bubbly then.
Yeah.
Nice.
Enjoy.
I think we all
enjoy.
Yeah, we all think you're going to be partying for sure. For my part, right. Thanks everybody for being here and being on our show. We were up against 2 big shows tonight and still averaged almost 300 for the entire show, which is almost unheard of. So I really appreciate everybody being here, being part of the group. I have a show tomorrow night. I believe it's at 8 p.m. Eastern time. But if you've subscribed and turn on your notifications, you'll find out right away because I'm going to send out that invitation immediately. Other than that, everybody have a great night. Stay out of trouble. You 3, don't drink and drive. That's all I can say. And stick around. Let's do this countdown timer, shut down the show. And I want to talk to you guys for one more second.
Go Dogs.
Peace.